Hello, hello. Welcome to the watercolor class. I'm not entirely sure what we're going to be painting today other than these mini silhouettes, so if you see any of these that you really like and you want me to focus on those, please let me know in the comments, and we can do that as one of them. You guys can kind of choose your own adventure on this one. Also, how's everyone doing today? We have a pretty nice day here in Colorado, although I got a storm warning, so hopefully there won't be too much thunder or things if a storm rolls in. I am going to be taping down some stuff off camera right now because I might work on a few more than you might do, but just so I can show you a few different things. So you're not waiting for me. I will start taping mine down over here. Yeah, so far so good today. Only thing is, I did want to make donuts this morning because I've been wanting a blueberry donut, like an old-fashioned one, and we tried to go to our local donut shop the other day to get them, and they were all out of donuts by the time, and every time we go, they're always out of the blueberry ones, so I wanted to make them, but I didn't have enough time. That'll have to be tomorrow's project, I think. Raining on the east coast of Canada. Rain is the perfect painting weather, I think. It's so peaceful. And then it feels just kind of nice just to be, I don't know, relaxing and painting while it's raining. I know the sound probably is really strange. I'm just ripping tape off camera. That's what that sound is. Cold in Scotland. Wet and chilly May. Oh, that's so exciting. Yeah, isn't it fun to see like little things that you learn where they're not like, I'm almost more excited by little improvements than I am by big ones because you get to see them more in real time, and it's like figuring out all these little things that will ultimately help you in the long run. That's really exciting. I really want to go to Scotland. That's one of the places that hopefully someday soon I will get to visit. We actually were supposed to go to Scotland last year, but, well, last year happened. All right, can we get some comments now for what colors you like, if you want the fields, if you want sunsets? What are you kind of feeling today so that we can figure out what we're going to be painting? We'll probably be painting 3 together. I might do some extra ones. You can feel free to follow along with the extra ones if I do them, but we'll focus on 3 for sure. We could even do a kind of a cloudy one. I don't have any clouds out here on my examples, but we could do kind of a cloudy day kind of vibe too, if people are feeling that. Okay, we got some warm colors. These ones. We'll definitely do a warm color one. I'm going to write them down too so I don't forget. rainy day and peachy, top left and peachy. Okay, so we've got 2 for this. We want this one, and then maybe a rainy day. Put those over there. Cool. Great. Well, it's 11 o'clock, so let me introduce myself to those who are new. My name is Lacey, and I do watercolors, and then I teach them here on TikTok, as well as I teach virtual classes, and I used to teach them locally, but I'm not doing that right now. If you want, it always makes my day if after the class you do share the pictures with me on my Instagram, either Lacey Walker Art or Rebel Unicorn Crafts. I don't post on Instagram that often, so feel free to follow me, but I don't put much on there, but it seems to be the easiest way for people to actually share the pictures with me, and I love seeing what you do. It just really brightens my day. The Lacey Walker Art one is where I post kind of more like quote-unquote fine art type stuff, and the Rebel Unicorn Crafts one is where I post more experimental or testing or similar to what I do on my account on TikTok. Hi, how are you? Also, some people do ask, this is definitely not required, but if you do feel like giving me a tip after class, I have a Venmo, which is at Rebel Unicorn Crafts. Totally not necessary, though, so please do not feel pressured. All right, let's talk about our setup in general. If your setup is different than mine, it's fine. I'm sure you're going to be able to adapt these, but I will tell you how I set mine up, so if you want to emulate it, you can. I am right-handed, which means that this is my dominant side. I'm going to put all of my wet supplies on my dominant hand side. That means my brush, my rag, my palette, any of my paints, and 2 cups of water. We're also going to want something to transfer clean water. So either a spray bottle or a pipette will help you do that with clean water. The reason why we have 2 cups of water here is one we're going to use to wash our brush, and the other, if you're using a pipette or something to transfer it, is going to be our clean water so that we can mix up nice, fresh, vibrant colors. Now, if you're like me or most people, you will probably accidentally wash your brush in the clean water one at least one time, and that is totally fine. As long as it doesn't get too pigmented, it shouldn't affect it too much unless you're mixing up like a really vibrant yellow or something. So we just need to try our best to keep a clean water one. Sometimes that is nice to have the spray bottle instead. I used to mainly use a pipette, and I still do use this most of the time, but I have started to use a spray bottle more often for transferring water into these because I can't dip my brush in this. Alright, so we're doing a rainy day vibe. We're also going to be doing this sunset here and a warmer sunset. So we're going to start by mixing up a couple colors for our skies here. And well, actually, we've got to first tape some of ours down. I've taped a few more down here, but I will tape some down here for you live. I always work on something. I don't have a slanted desk because I like to have just a flat surface to do a bunch of stuff on. So this is a backing board from a print I bought. You can use chipboard, masonite, whatever you have is totally fine, but just go ahead and if you have something you can tape this down to, an old Amazon box, let's actually tape some of these down. We tape these down to do a few things. 1, they won't move around on us. 2, they won't warp as much. And 3, they end up with these cute little borders. If you're working in a sketchbook, you can either just kind of paint in a general shape of it. You can also mark off in the middle of or in your sketchbook with the tape if you want to create kind of nice lines and have it be kind of crisp. However you're doing it is totally fine. The way I teach my classes are, I will show you exactly what I'm doing and I will explain it, and if I make any mistakes, I'll explain how I try to fix them and things like that. But these classes are adaptable So if you don't like the color scheme that we're using, or you want to do something a little different, go for it. Make this your own. You can choose how you want things to kind of go forward in the class. And yeah, I will give you some tips on if you are going to be changing the color scheme, how to do that without kind of ruining some of the effects. It mainly just has to do with the transparency and opacity levels of the paints. So we're just going to finish getting set up here. We'll be starting mixing colors momentarily. I like to use one of these paint pots that has a pretty deep well. We're going to be mixing up larger quantities of paints today. If you don't have a traditional paint palette like this, the smaller ones will work just fine. Or if you don't have anything like that at all, you can do things like save yogurt cups. Ice trays work really well for it. You just don't want to use them for ice afterwards. So yeah, if you're looking for budget type things, you can go to the dollar store and get an ice tray, and that'll work really well. We want to make sure that we're not touching the paper when we're pressing this down as much as we can avoid it. But we do want to make sure these get pushed down nicely. You can, if you're worried about the oils in your fingertips, if you maybe just put on lotion or something, you can go ahead and actually use like the end of the brush or a toothpick to push these down. All right, we are almost ready. Last one. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is mix up some of our colors. Let's actually figure out what colors we're going to be using. This is my little box of colors I have. I am a little low on some of my colors, so we might have to get a little creative here, but you can use mine as kind of a guide. We're going to need a blue, because we're going to be doing this one as well as we're going to do kind of a stormy, rainy day. I'm going to start with some of this phthalo blue. And I use these tube paints because I think they're a little bit more versatile than pan paints because you can do a little bit with a couple different things with them. Wow. I'm a little tongue-tied today. But your pan paints will work just fine for this too. If you're using tube paints, you're going to want to put some of your colors right on the side so that we can use them to mix up. Let's see, what else do I have? We might want another blue. Sometimes I like to use two different blues. Let's actually get some cerulean as well on our palette. Ooh, I squeezed that harder than I meant to. We're going to want to do some sort of an orangey type color. So this is actually an orange. A vermilion would work really well too. Or if you don't have a dedicated orange, I would recommend a yellow ochre and then maybe a magenta to make it. Speaking of that, I want to find my magenta as well, because I want to use that. We might also throw in a little live test of, I don't know if anybody saw this video, but I did make some Pinkest Pink watercolor. I think this is dry enough to test, so I might put this on one of them. We'll see. This is going to be most similar to an opera type color. Where are you, magenta? In here. Where is it? Here it is. This is the Quinacridone Magenta, or Quinacridone, or however you want to say it. We're going to want a pinky or kind of a Bordeaux or a red color. And that should actually be enough to do these and the stormy ones. So let's start with these 4 colors. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pipette or my spray bottle, and I'm going to put in at least 1, maybe 1.5 pipettes worth of water, because we want to make sure we mix up enough color in order to actually use across all of these if you're doing multiples. We also want to make sure we have some tester strips. So anytime I cut my paper, I always keep all the little scraps so that we can actually test these as we go. So I'm just going to wet my brush. I'm going to start mixing up the blue. Let's start with some of this cerulean blue. And here's why I use tester strips specifically. In case you are not familiar with this, you can see how dark that looks here. When I actually apply it, it's super light. So we don't get a really good idea of the color when it's in here and it's wet. This will also dry lighter in general, so it's always good to have these so that you know actually what you're working with. Let's add a little bit of that phthalo blue too. Let's see what that does. It brightens it a little bit. I feel like adding just a little bit of orange. Orange is the complement color, and it will tone this down a little bit. So this is not a totally necessary step, but I like to tone my blues down just a little bit so they're a little bit more kind of believable to be a sky, and we just want a teeny tiny bit. So I'm going to take just the tip of my brush, put it in my orange, and mix it in. We can always add more. It's harder to take it out, so add little bits at a time to make small increment adjustments. I think I could add a little bit more. And I actually kind of feel like turning this a little bit more rich blue. So I think I might also put just a teeny bit of the magenta in too, just to give it a slight rich kind of ness to it. Let's see, I'm going to need some more tester strips, I can already tell. I like that, but I want it to be a little more blue. So it's all about kind of making little adjustments. That might have been a big adjustment. Let's find out. So that was phthalo blue in there. Oh, yes, I like that. There we go. That's going to be my blue color for this one here. It's not the exact same blue, but it's similar. This one I might have actually used an ultramarine on initially, or a cobalt. But this is the color I'm going to be using today. I also feel like this has a little bit more rainy day vibe, so we can use it for the other one as well. Okay, I'm going to wash my brush off. Now I'm going to mix up kind of an orangey type color. So here, I'll show you with this one. I'm just going to spray in a few times. I did about 3 sprays worth. And now we're going to take some of, we're going to do blue, orange, and the magenta color here. Let's do the orange first. I'm going to grab some of that orange. And I'm actually feeling like I want to add a little bit of yellow ochre to this to give it a little more golden tone. So let me find that. There are a lot of really beautiful bright colors for yellows in watercolor, but I always love just the tone of this yellow ochre color because it's a little bit more golden. So here is the orange without it, so you can make some decisions. We could add more orange, maybe a little bit more to make it a little brighter. But let's see where that's at. It's about the same, but let's grab a little of this yellow ochre, just to make this a little bit more golden, maybe even just a little bit more. Yeah, I'm liking that a little bit more. I'm going to push it just a little bit more. I'm going to get some more tester strips. I think that will be very pretty. And we're going to do our magenta type color. Now, I might do something here. You can choose to do this or not. But I'm actually not going to wash my brush. I'm going to just spray in my clean water here. I'm going to use this brush that already has some of that orange in it. And I'm going to grab my magenta to put it into here. And this is just going to kind of infuse this magenta color with a little bit of this so that the colors work together really well. Mix that up really good. And we've got kind of a nice magenta type color. I think that'll be really pretty on those. We also want to make sure for this, if we want to do some of the kind of really fun sunset type things, that we have some extra magenta on hand. If it's in a paint palette, just make sure, like a dried pan set, make sure it's wet so that when we dip into it, we can really grab some of that pigment. So here are my 3 colors for my skies. Here, let me show you the blue as well. Now, if you're changing the colors, which totally feel free to do that, what you want to do is, I'm trying to find a pencil. This isn't a pencil, but it's a charcoal. If I want you just to mimic the opacity level or transparency level that I am using. So in essence, if I were to write the word hello here, what you want to do is just make sure that for all of the colors you're mixing up, if they differ from mine, that you would be able to see that word at about the same level if you wrote it on a piece of paper and then used your paint over it. All right, let's get started. So we're going to start with this blue to pink one. We're going to be doing a gradient wash. Yes, that's the word. So the way I do my washes, there are a bunch of different ways to do it, but this is my preferred method, is I will take a clean brush. This is a round brush, this one's a size 10. It actually reminds me a little bit more of some brand size 12s. And I'm actually going to be using this for the entirety of this class. This is the only brush I'm going to use. Feel free to use whatever brushes you're going to use, but you really only need one brush to do this. So I'm going to grab my blue. I'm going to make sure there's a decent amount of water sucked up in this. And then I'm going to hold this up at kind of like maybe it's like a 30 to 45 degree angle. And I'm going to make a line straight across the top, meeting where that tape is. And we want this drip line. See how it kind of falls down? Then we're going to grab just a little bit more of that pigment. We're going to touch that drip line, and we're going to make another horizontal line across the page. We're just touching and grabbing that line of pigment as we go down. I'm going to do this until I get about halfway down the page, just repeating this each time. Oh, and we're actually there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little bit out of this brush by just pushing it on the side of this. Then I'm going to grab some of this pink, and I'm going to touch it into that drip line and pull it down. Just touching into that pink a little bit at a time. Until we get all the way down to the bottom. Now what we want to do is we don't want that standing water to sit there, so I'm going to dry my brush off. And then I'm going to use it as kind of like a little syringe. These round brushes, if you get one that you like, they will do this where they can suck up water. They're great for lifting, and that's why I really like using these. So that's our first gradient wash. I'm actually going to show you a different way to do this as well over here on a different one in case you missed the first part of it, as well as if you want to see something a little bit different. I'm going to start by putting some clean water over here, and we're actually going to transition blue to clear, which is actually going to just lighten that blue before we go into our pink, which will help make sure that it gets light enough so that that pink will show through a little bit more and it'll be a little less purpley. So here's a second option. I'm going to grab my blue, And I'm only going to do one line of that blue before I just slowly start dipping my brush in, and I'm not trying to replace all the pigment. I'm just dipping in a little bit, and this is going to just lighten that just a little bit so that at this point, now when I dip in just a little bit into that pink, you're going to be able to see the pink just a little bit more. We want to make sure that we start the pink up high enough in the painting so that when we actually do add our mountains, we're going to still be able to see it, at least hinting behind the mountains. So that's two different ways to do that gradient type wash. If you did yours and you have a really harsh transition line or you don't like it, just leave it as it is. We can do a second layer to help correct some of those mistakes, and I will show you between my layers kind of how I evaluate and then make decisions on how to move forward. The one thing you don't want to do, well, I mean, it's your painting, you can do whatever you want to it, but in general, if you keep fussing with something while it's still semi-wet, you're going to start to get these back runs and kind of weird things that you didn't want to happen in them. Sometimes those are really happy accidents, but a lot of times you end up doing more quote-unquote damage to the painting when you try to fix a whole bunch of stuff all at once while it's in different stages of drying. And actually the best way to fix things in watercolor is just let it dry and paint over it in another layer in a way that's going to compensate for things you don't like that are happening. Alright, so let's dive in to this one here. We're going to do the really bright, vibrant colors. I'm going to wash my brush because I don't want any of that blue involved. Make sure, I also do kind of after I wash my brush, I just wipe it on my paper towel just to make sure there's no pigment on there that's going to surprise me that was stuck in there. Because sometimes I find people when they wash their brushes, they kind of just will almost dangle it in there, and you really got to get down in there and move that pigment out of there. Okay. So we're going to do another gradient wash. We're going to also add in some, additional pigment into this while it's wet. So this is going to be we're going to have to move pretty quickly on this one. So you might want to watch what I'm doing first. And again, I'll demonstrate it twice too. But you might want to watch what I do first so that you can kind of see the timing of things. So I'm going to go into my pink, and I have a little bit of this blue in here. It's not enough to actually really change this very much, but I'm going to go ahead and at least mix it in so that it's evenly in there. I'm going to start by making a drip line of that pink. Oops. Then I'm just going to go straight into this kind of orange color. And I'm going to pull this all the way down to the bottom. Now, if you like that, you can stop there. If you want to make it a little bit more vibrant, while it's still wet, I can dip right directly into my pigment. And while it's wet, I can touch along here to create some kind of interesting, maybe sunset type cloud shapes. I could also dip right into my yellow ochre to maybe hint to where the sun is hiding. Kind of peeking out. Remove that extra water. And this is all about just working while it's still damp. You don't want it to be like runny. But while it's still damp, it'll move around and create just kind of beautiful shapes. And we can always add another layer on this too. If you don't like your first layer, it's totally fine. Let's do that again over here. I'm going to do it on this bottom one. No, actually, I'll do it on this one. All right, I'm going to start with that pinky type color. Again, I'm just going to do one line. I'm going to grab that orange and continue this down. If you're struggling at all with this technique, just know that it just takes a little bit of time to kind of get this down. And once you get it, it's super easy, but it is one of those kind of muscle memory type things where the more you do it, the easier it's going to get. All right, we're going to dip into that pink while this is still damp, and maybe I'm going to be a little more haphazard with this one. I'm going to grab some of that yellow. Ooh, I got way too much. It looks really dark. I'm going to take that off my brush. Maybe I just want to add in a little bit more of that just pink. You can even add just water if you wanted to lighten an area too in there. And this is one where with the sunset, so you'll see how a lot of different things are going to start happening here on this one. And this is one where you can kind of go in and mess with it because intentionally you're making a bunch of different colors of different saturations and a lot of things to happen. But if you want one of those kind of nice flat washes, this is where you don't want to mess with stuff. So I'm going to leave mine like this for this layer. As I'm showing you each of these layers, just know that they might not stay quite like this. I might put another layer in if I want to emphasize something else, if I want to up the vibrancy of something. So if yours aren't looking how you want them to, totally fine. All right. Now we're going to do our cloudy day one. So we actually want at least a piece of our paper towel because I want to lift some clouds out of this. Okay. So I've got my paper towel here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, before I start this one, I'm just going to rip off some of this so that I have a nicely torn edge here that's going to be kind of natural. And then I'm going to bunch it up because the way I'm going to lift this is actually with this side. If we press this part down in it, I mean, it can look kind of neat, but it does imprint the paper towel's print onto it, which is not necessarily what we want to do for clouds, but if you're feeling experimental, you can feel free to try it that way. My recommendation, though, is to use the rip side because it looks a little more natural and a little more like clouds kind of just on their own. You can kind of crumple it. You could use multiple to get them bigger, however you want to do it. But just set aside some dry paper towels that you've ripped kind of on the natural grain. I'm going to work on this one this way so that we don't have to pull it all the way over here. And again, this is another one where you might want to watch first, and I will demonstrate it twice. Because with lifting, you want to be kind of fast. So I'm going to start again with this blue. And I'm going to just make a flat wash. I'm going to, on this one, just pull this all the way down to the bottom. Suck up that extra water. And then, while it's still wet, we want to take our paper towel and just lift some of those clouds. If you want to emulate some rain, you can kind of do some downstrokes. If it's not lifting quite like you want, you can wash your brush. Take that water, tap it on there. I'm going to rip another fresh one here. There we go. A few downward strokes. There, kind of hinting to some rain. I'm going to do the same thing over here. On this middle one. So I'm going to do the flat wash all the way down. There we go. Oop, I forgot to rip my paper. Let's rip it again. Let's dot some of those out. Also, a slightly more advanced technique is learning when your paper starts to dry, if it starts to get to the point where it's like just almost dry, and this takes some just practice in getting to know your paper, your paints, the humidity where you're at, you can take a damp brush and right along kind of the base of these, you can dab, I don't know why I can't figure out the word, but this will make the bottoms of these maybe kind of like thunderheads. It'll concentrate that color kind of at the base of them, because we're adding more moisture to the paper, and since the paper is starting to dry more in other areas, this is wet, and it actually makes kind of the pigment rush to the edges of the newly wet area and kind of stick to them. It's a pretty subtle effect, but it does do it a little bit there. All right, so I have made 6 little paintings here. Let's start with the ones that we were mainly doing. So the next thing that I always do is I just evaluate. I take a minute to relook at these. They probably have changed a little bit because when they dry lighter. And I can just make some decisions. If I really like this, I can keep it as it is and actually move on to the mountains, or I can make another layer. In general, I think I want my pink to be a little bit brighter. I think I want to keep the blue as it is. So I'm going to do another layer on this one. And I'm going to talk you through how I'm going to do this one. So I'm going to again start with some fresh water. So I'm actually going to be doing a flat wash starting with water. And we want to do this across the whole way. If we just start with pink halfway down, we'll have a really harsh line. But if we actually do this the whole way up, it's going to make a really nice gradient. So starting with water, and this is going to feel like, why am I doing this? But do your flat wash with your water if you want to do it this way. Grab that water, pull it down to right above where your pink initially started, then dip right into your pink. And now we're going to pull it down. And that, for me, I just wanted to brighten my pink area. You could also do your blue into your pink if you just want the whole thing to be brighter. But that's going to be a really nice way to do that. Mountain technique on a desert landscape. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so there's that one. Now let's look at this one. I think this could be brighter and more vibrant and maybe add another layer onto some of those. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to basically do the exact same thing I did the first time. Well, hello, it's so nice to have you here. So we're going to be doing another gradient wash here. I'm going to wash my brush because I, at this point, have forgotten what color was in it. I'm going to grab my pink or magenta color. I'm going to put that across the top. And then I'm going to start my orange just a little bit higher. If you had a really harsh gradient, if you start your next layer 1 or 2 brush strokes above or below where the transition happened on the previous one, this will really help it kind of smooth out. Let's take some more of that pink. And while it's still wet, let's just kind of go, I'm going to go a little crazier with it. Just be real loose and free. And actually, I'm liking how that looks right there, so I'm going to stop. Yes, so I have started to, TikTok lets me download these afterwards. I don't think they're the best quality, but hopefully I'm explaining it well enough where you can kind of follow along. And I do upload these to my YouTube channel, which is Rebel Unicorn Crafts. After these, it usually takes a day for me to get them up, but feel free to go over there. I've got a ton of other tutorials too. Or well, some, maybe not a ton. And you know what? I think I really want to fix this one. This one looks a little bit too, not how I want it. Yeah, that is part of the problem, is not knowing when to stop. It's definitely always an art problem. You want to keep playing with it. That's also one of the reasons why I like to do multiple of these at a time, because when I don't want to stop, I can just move on to another one. Paint cacti. Sure, yeah, we can do that for a class sometime. All right, I'm going to do the exact same thing I did on that one just a minute ago on this one. And again, I'm going to start this a little bit higher this time with my orange. And I'm actually going to start moving this one into just clear water to get a little bit of a gradient. It's going to be really subtle, but it'll be there. And then I'm just going to dip directly into that magenta again. And I want to do this while it's still wet enough to kind of seep and become really beautiful. I'm liking that there. Paper recommendations. My favorite paper is Canson XL watercolor paper, 140 for a pound, or 140, 140 pound. That's kind of my go-to, especially for painting these little ones. It's all about finding what you like. I don't like the ones that have a ton of texture. I like them to be smoother personally, but I know some people really like the texture that other ones have. All right. There's that one. And you know what? I'm going to keep this one as it is because I just kind of like the subtlety of it. We could change it, but we don't have to. All right, let's go back to this one. I kind of like the clouds here on this one, so I will keep this one the same. Oh, thanks for subscribing. Yeah, I'm on YouTube. Haven't been posting as much lately there because quite frankly, I have been a little bit obsessed with TikTok and very distracted by it. So I'm mainly here, but I am trying to get back into posting more there so that if anybody wants to, they've got some more content to follow along with. Let's see, I think I missed a question. Never find a good tape that does not seep onto the paper. I just buy, this is generic masking tape from, I think I bought this on Amazon. I use kind of whatever. All right. Yeah, I don't have great recommendations. One of my TikTok artist friends, her name is Andrea. If you haven't checked her out, she's got some cool stuff too. But she uses that blue 3M painter's tape, and she lives in Georgia where it's a lot more humid. And she says she has trouble with if she doesn't use that tape there because of the humidity levels. I'm in Colorado, it's super dry, so some of my results might vary to yours depending on your humidity levels. This is actually an art form that does depend on that, and since I've never really experienced that level of humidity, I can't speak to it. All right. Anyways, let's make a second layer on this because these clouds are just kind of, I don't know, they're okay, but they're a little boring to me. So I'm gonna get kind of set up here. I've got another little scrap of this. And let's just get ready. I'm just going to have these kind of prepped and ready to go. I'm going to bunch them up. The blue painter's tape seeps. Wow. They make specific, and I have some of this and I've done it before, where you can actually pre-stretch your paper, and then they have, it's kind of like that paper packaging tape where you wet it that you use on it, and I can do a video on how to do that, but that might be what you need to resort to if you're there. Since I can't really relate to the problem, I have a hard time helping solve it. I can tell you a few things I have done when I accidentally do have the seepage to fix things. Okay, so you now use the 3M masking tape. It works good. Good. All right, cool. All right, let's let's take our blue. We're just going to do the same thing again. I'm just going to paint over those clouds. I'm also going to actually transition to the clear water as I move towards the bottom. Give a slight gradient. I'm going to wash my brush really quick because I already know I'm going to want to add some more water right to where I want those clouds to be to make sure I get extra. Pigment out. And then I'm just going to tap to really try to get some of those out and scrape down. This one is not cooperating as much. I think I am using some of the Strathmore paper here, and that's not my favorite one, but you know, we do what we can. And add some more water towards the base of these because these are starting to dry a little bit. So I should be able to get some reactions here, just to kind of vary it. We can also lift with our brush a little bit if you don't have a paper towel. If you really want to get a little bit more wild, you can grab some more of that blue, and you can also touch it here if you're not getting the right effect that you wanted. Then you could dab this out. So there's a question on why you stretch the paper. If you learn from somebody who is a real traditional teacher, and there is some merit to doing it. I'm just too impatient. But they will tell you that if you're using 300-pound paper, which is really nice watercolor paper, you don't need to really do this. And 300-pound watercolor paper doesn't really warp at all. But if you're using 140-pound, they will tell you to pre-wet the paper completely, put it on your surface, and stretch it out with this special tape. And it keeps it locked in place as well as it makes it so that it does not warp or doesn't warp as much. I personally find it to be just a time-consuming step that I think it helps, but it doesn't help enough for me to be patient enough to do it. You turned all your cheap paper into test strips. Yeah, that's a great idea. If you, I do try to use all my paper even if I don't really like it, but that is a great point that if you've got a paper you really don't like, you don't need to toss it, but it doesn't mean you have to use it for your paintings. You can just cut them into little strips and use them to test your stuff. All right. So I have used the block. I really like them, but they always make me nervous when I'm removing it from the block. I always feel like I'm going to damage the one, so it makes me nervous to use it. Here are all of my skies that I'm going to be using. I like all of them, so I am done with those. We need to move on to the mountains now. I think I'm going to be doing kind of a steel blue color for the mountains, so I'm actually going to cannibalize this blue in order to make a really dark blue. And we want to actually mix up our darkest color that we're going to put. If you wanted to have yours be more purpley, go ahead and add a little more pink or something like that to change it. Yeah, I can show the block. I'll have to do it at the end because I want to make sure that we get through, at least get a couple of these layers of mountains on while they're drying. While one's drying, I can go grab my block. So let's mix up this color. I need another tester strip. Speaking of tester strips, there we go. So we want a dark color for this one. We're going to make our darkest color, then we're going to transfer it into some water so it's nice and watered down, and we'll slowly be adding pigment back into it as we do this. Alright, so here's where the blue is starting. I want to make that a lot darker, so I'm just going to go and I'm going to grab a bunch of these blue. Just really make this really pigmented. It's a lot more pigmented. Then I'm going to wash my brush off because I want to grab some of this orange. We don't have to be quite as careful, but you don't want to put that whole dollop of orange in there. And by adding this, it's going to really tone this down. It's also going to make this color darker. It's going to become more of a steely type blue. I do think I want a teeny bit again of kind of that depth that adding a slight purple tint will give it. So I'm going to grab some of this magenta and put this in there too. Ooh, that was too much. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe I've got it mixed in nice now. There we go. That's a nice color for these. So you're going to want a real dark color like this. Go ahead and mix up your darkest mountain color. You could make it even darker than this, but this is probably the minimum level of pigment and darkness that you want here. So you wouldn't be able to really see. I need another piece of paper here. Here we go. Let's just put it over this. So if I put that over there, you can't super see that behind it, although that's not a waterproof pen, so now it's just running into it. Alright, so we made our dark color. Now we need to water it down because we are going to eventually use this color in one of our layers. You can do as many layers of mountains as you want, but you want to slowly make it darker and darker as you go down. In general, when you're looking at the mountains, it's funny, I've lived by the mountains my entire life, or been able to see them, and I never really thought about this until I started painting them, but when you look at them, you'll see that the ones in the back look kind of foggy almost, and they're lighter in color. And so that's how we're going to create the illusion of depth. So I've got clean water here. Well, it's mostly clean, but it doesn't need to be perfect. And I'm going to dry my brush, and I'm just going to start by putting one brush full of this in here and seeing what color I get. I think I want it to be a little bit darker, so I'm going to dry my brush again. I'm going to put one more brush full there. And I think that is actually dark enough to use for my first atmospheric perspective. Prospective. Great, I actually did not know the term for that, so thank you. Alright, so now I've got my dark color here. Got my light color here. I'm going to take my light color, and we want to work on the ones that are dry enough to work on. So if one of yours is still too wet, take a hair dryer to it and dry it off, or just wait for a few more minutes. Now, before I actually paint on this, let's talk just a little bit about the mountains. One thing I see people do, and this isn't necessarily wrong, it's just sometimes people don't like how it ends up looking, is we've been conditioned that mountains look like this, right? There are some mountains that kind of look like this, but depending on the mountains that you want to emulate, a lot of them don't look like this. They are a little bit more rocky, they'll have deeper valleys, they might go up and then come down sharp before going up again. So you might want to vary this. Practice. When I'm painting my mountains, I actually usually I paint kind of here, but I will make it a little bit looser so that I actually have less control over the brush, because I find that then adds in some natural variation that I might not have been able to create. And I don't always have a specific plan unless I am emulating a mountain set. I will evaluate each painting. I will see kind of what it's giving me, what I want to highlight from the background, what I want to maybe cover, or just what I'm feeling. And then I will do my first layer. You can work from left to right or right to left. I do a little bit of both. So I feel like starting with a mountain peak over here, and then I want a nice dip down so you can really see some of that color. I want it to come up a little bit, down, and then maybe up again. And then just color in the base of that. There's my first layer of mountains. So currently my favorite watercolors are this Shin-Han watercolor and Core. I like Core, but mainly because I like the yellow ochre, the phthalo blue, and the magenta. So I have a set of like 10 of them, and I don't usually use the other colors from it, but I really like these three. Again, I'm going to evaluate what this is giving me. I think that my mountain range in general should start lower here and maybe kind of come up to mimic some of these clouds. Maybe that pressure from the mountains actually is splitting some of those clouds before it goes back down. And again, this is with my lightest color. So start down and then come up. Maybe it's kind of like the Twin Peaks before it comes back down. There we go. And this one, I'm feeling kind of a valley type vibes here. So we're going to start here, and I think it's going to go up on the sides. Your mountains do not have to look like mine. You're welcome to emulate the shape of the ones I'm making, but if you're like, no, my painting looks different and this would look better, make those decisions. You can also see I'm using the exact same color on this one as this one, but whatever your background color is going to ultimately affect the color of your mountains and the layers that you put there, which is kind of fun, and I don't know, it really kind of shows the difference of using something like watercolor. My nails matching it. This is my favorite color. I think it's like Sally Hansen's, it's called Royal Hue. This nail color, I get more compliments on it than anything I've ever gotten complimented on. I really like it. It kind of reminds me of like a denim or something a little bit. Oh, thanks so much for coming. No, this is just, I do have a dip nails because I do some metalwork stuff too, and I bite my nails, so I have to have some extra protection for my nails. Well, I don't even bite them, they just, I don't know. I'm not good at keeping them nice, so I have dip nails, but then I just put normal nail polish on them to make them look nice, so it's just a normal nail polish. Alright, let's add our mountains on these ones to our first layer. The taping down does prevent, there is a little bit of warping, and that's also a good way to see how dry something is. Most of mine are pretty dry. You might be able to see this one pop out a little bit at the bottom, but as it dries it will settle back down. So yeah, it does help that. Alright, let's put in this one. And I don't really have a plan here. I'm just going to kind of do what I'm feeling. That's what I was feeling. So that's my first layer of mountains there. Remember to suck up that extra water at the base. This one I added a little extra yellow. I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the camera, but there's a little extra yellow here, so that's kind of where I want there to be a little valley to hint that maybe the sun is just slipping behind there. So maybe it comes up before going down. There we go. Layer there. And then this one too. Same thing, I don't super have a plan. Just kind of going with my gut feeling on that one. Alright, we do need to, or I'm going to do more layers on these, but I do need to make sure that these dry in between layers, at least most of the way. If you were to add a layer onto a slightly damp layer at this point, the edges would be a little fuzzier. It wouldn't be totally ruined, but they won't have that nice crispness to it, as well as you might start to get some back runs and some other effects. So just either use a hairdryer to encourage these to actually dry. I don't do that during this live class because that would be really loud for you guys, and I don't want to do that to you. But so I will actually go grab my block so you can see it. Do I ever mix colors off paper before adding it, or do you just layer on the color? So I actually pre-mixed almost all of the colors here before I add them to the paper. Now, if I'm painting something like an animal, I usually just mix as I go, but for these, I like to have large quantities of the colors. Okay. This is the block that I currently have. I also have an Arches block, but it's still, actually I haven't used it yet. But this is the block, so it's Fluid 100. This is 100% cotton, 300 pound, I think this is cold pressed. Yeah, cold pressed. So usually that means that, I don't know, I like the texture of it better. But this is a painting where I spent so long on this painting, and then I painted something else in way less time, and I liked how that one turned out better. But so this is one that I painted here, and I actually did try to take this off the block, but I got really nervous, and I stopped because I was starting to cut into it. But because this is really thick paper, you can see how it separates a little bit, but in general it stays. And they kind of have like that wax coating that keeps them together. Then the way you take these off is usually you have to use something like a blade to run under here. But sometimes the blade then transfers maybe some of that metal type stuff to the underneath one, or you can accidentally cut into your paper. But yeah, you just slip it under there. I don't think I've got one on hand, but just to illustrate with paper, yeah, you would just take your blade, separate them, and then you would cut along that wax as it was under there. So that's the block that I currently have, and they come with, this one has 10 sheets. I think I've used 2 or 3 of them. Palette knives work well. Yeah, palette knives do work well too. For that, you're totally right. My palette knives are always a little bit messy, and so that's why I don't like using them, and I usually accidentally transfer some sort of acrylic paint to the page under it, and then I feel really bad because I've ruined really expensive paper. But I don't use the blocks as much, mainly just because of that. The removing of the paper is really difficult. They're great because you don't have to do any prep to the paper, and you can just start painting. So those are kind of nice for travel too. All right, I think these are ready to do a second layer. So we need to grab our tester strip. Let's do a little test line so that we know where we're at with that color. I'm going to dry this off so I don't transfer some of the water into our dark color. Credit card might work. That's a good idea. Is there a reason why I don't add water to your watercolor paper? It depends on what I'm painting. So that's just a different technique to get some different effects. And it's just not well, for this, it's not my preferred method for any of this stuff, but there are a ton of different ways to do this. If your colors have set for a minute and you are still following along and you want to darken this color, go into your darkest color, remix it up to make sure that all those colors haven't separated, and then just take maybe one brush full of that pigment and add it to your lighter color. We just want this to be a little bit darker. I think I want it to be a little more dark than that. There we go. So yeah, sometimes I do pre-wet the paper, but it just kind of depends on what I'm doing. Okay, so we can go ahead and make our second layer. Now, when we're painting these, I understand that in real life, mountains do sometimes eclipse the layer behind them, and you can kind of get it to work, but often with these, that little blip that goes over, it's hard to discern whether it's part of the range behind it or the range that you're currently painting. So if you're just getting started with this and you don't kind of know how to flub that a little bit, that's not the word I meant, but if you don't know how to kind of make that happen, just picture the portion of the range where maybe it only ever goes up to meet the previous one, just to kind of give yourself some favors. All right, so the other thing, when we're doing our second layer of mountains, and this is something I struggle with too, is you've already made a layer. The temptation is going to be to follow that layer. So one thing I recommend doing is making sure that you intentionally change at least one portion of it so it doesn't look like you're just making the same layer over and over again. So rather than going up at first here, I might just make sure I go down, and then it's already changed enough to where it will be a little different. There we go. You get nervous and overpaint. Stuff's a hot mess. You're trying to... Okay, if it's still kind of looking messy, it's okay. We can add more layers of mountains, and worst case scenario, at the very end of this, we can add some happy little trees. Also, once you take the tape off, even if you're like, I hate this painting, it automatically becomes like 30% better once you remove the tape. Okay, so we've got our second layer there. Let's add a second layer here. And yeah, if you're overworking your stuff, that was one of the things that it took me the longest to learn. And so maybe that's the main lesson that you take away from today, is to try to let yourself just take a step back before continuing to work on stuff. So now I've got 2 layers on all 3 of these. Let's go ahead and add the layers on these ones too. Start here. And again, trying to intentionally change at least one thing in your previous layer. Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed the clouds. Yeah, it's such a fun technique, and it's so... Once you get the hang of it, it's such a simple technique. I remember thinking, how am I going to paint clouds with watercolor? Because I love painting clouds. And then once I figured it out, I was like, oh, well, yeah, this is so easy, and it kind of makes perfect little clouds. Second layer there. And let's add another layer to this one. I will probably end up doing 3 layers on all of these. And that's not necessarily because that's exactly what they need, but just for time's sake, so we can also see the results, and we can see if I want to add some trees too. Let's darken this color just a little bit as well. All right, we're going to go through our 4th tester strip today. Ooh, okay. And the other thing I want to do is I am going to paint one with this pinkest pink one. I'm going to have to tape another one down if anybody is interested, because I really want to see how well it works. So we'll do that while we're waiting for our other layers to dry after we put this 3rd layer on, before I can take them off and things like that. So again, I'm going to darken this color just a little bit. We can check it. Grab more pigment. At this point, you could probably also go just straight into your darkest pigment, depending on how much you have darkened yours over time. Pink one looks like a sunrise. Isn't it funny how the sunrise and the sunset are very similar things, and yet they have very distinct qualities to them? All right, adding my 3rd layer. And if you're having some issues like this, do you see how I've got a little bit of that back bleeding here? Well, let's just turn that into part of this next layer here so that we don't have to see it. Look, fixed. We had a little mistake there, and now we don't. I am using a mix of Core and Shinhan watercolors. With each layer, we can make decisions on what we want to be, or what we want to save or preserve or fix or hide. This one, you're going to be able to see here, this one is not dry enough yet. See how it's branching out? Okay, so what I'm going to do now, just to demonstrate what I might do if I got into a scenario like this, is I might just go ahead and paint that entire layer again. It's going to be a little darker than I wanted it to be, but it wasn't dry enough yet, so now I need to kind of just fix it and go with it. Do I have set times? Yes, every Saturday at the same time. It's 11 a.m. Mountain Time, which I believe is 10 a.m. Pacific, and 1 p.m. Eastern. I am live painting here, and it's always in the class format. Depending on how much I have to do during the week, I will hop on a few times and work on stuff or paint or answer questions. I've been pretty busy lately, so I haven't had a ton of time during the week, but either way, I will be here on Saturdays for sure. Watercolor squares or tubes? I like tubes because I can actually, here, I'll grab something while we're waiting for things to dry. Let's see, where is it? Okay, so here is my dried pan. And this is actually just filled with all of these. This is why I'm actually have less than I usually do, because I just refilled this. But I like tube paints because they can do all the things. So you can do a lot with dried pans, and they're wonderful to use. But you don't get them in this kind of nice gel consistency, and you can get extra pigmentation from them. But the tube paints, you can also make your own dried set and then just let them dry. And now you've got dried pans, because these you can reuse. Whoops. If I spray these here, you can see, look, it's already refreshed and it's nice. Yes, exactly. In my personal practice, I use the hairdryer all the time, but I just don't want to subject you guys to that because I feel like that would be very unpleasant. But yeah, that's why I like tubes. I like dried paints, I like tube paints, and with tube paints I can do both. Makes me feel like I'm getting extra bang for my buck. Alright, let's add our third layer on these ones. These ones should be dry. That one that I've had to paint 2 layers on the same part is probably still too wet though. Okay, and make my third layer. You can add 2 layers, 1 layer, 7 layers, whatever you want. Yeah, I have a whole bunch of, I actually have 2 different hair dryers plugged in down here. And they've got paint all over them. I use them more in my studio than I do on my hair. You can use them in acrylic paint too. Not as well as with watercolor, but sometimes I do. Okay, there's a third one there. And let's just go back to these to look at these really quick while we're making some decisions. I am going to start painting with that paint I made the other day, just to see in a second. But just to tell you kind of how I evaluate things, I will just take a look at these as I go on. This one I could maybe put another row of mountains on. I don't think it necessarily needs it. This one, I don't have enough space, as well as I like how it's balanced and how it looks, so I definitely don't want to add another layer to this one. So this one I will call done. I think I'll call that one done too. Notice if you let the paper dry with the tape on, they dry flat. Yes, yeah, that definitely helps. So yeah, I will usually go do something once I'm done painting before I take them off. During these lives, I take them off while they're still a little damp just so that you guys can see the end result, but that's not usually how I do it. This one I think absolutely needs at least one more layer, but again, I tried to put one on too early and it's not quite there. And then over here, this one I'm going to add another layer, but this one you can still see some of that shimmer maybe. And that's how you can know if your paper is like still really wet. This one's still really wet. That one I probably will not add another layer, and I probably won't add another layer to this one. So yeah, I'm actually going to try to do another really vibrant sunset, and this is the watercolor that I made the other day with that pinkest pink color, and so it worked really well when it was still wet, but I haven't tried it yet now that it's dried. So this one is just a curiosity for me, and I really hope it works. Because, man, it's pink. Let's tape it right here. Yeah, and I have, I will upload the live so you can go back and watch what we did today if you wanted to do exactly what we did today. I also have some shorter videos, too, if you're like, wow, that was a lot of talking, and I don't want to sit through an hour and a half of this. There are some shorter videos where you can just kind of pause and work along too. So I know people all work at different speeds and in different ways. So hopefully there's a few different ways for you to participate. I know one of my favorite things to do is while I'm painting, even if I'm kind of following a tutorial, I like to put on like a movie or a show or some music. And so sometimes it's nice to have something you can pause. All right, do we want to take guesses as to whether or not this paint is going to work that I made? So this was the Stuart Simple's Pinkest Pink Powdered Pigment, and then I mixed it with a watercolor binder that I made. And that binder, I used a recipe I found online that's a mix of glycerin, I think clove essential oil, which clove it has a little bit of antibacterial properties to it, and then maybe some honey. I don't know if I added honey. I think it was just glycerin. What is that? What's the other thing I'm missing? There's some sort of a powder that absorbs a whole bunch of stuff. Gum Arabic? That's what it is. Okay, all right, we've got it will work. We're voting for it'll work. All right, I'm nervous. Let's try a few things here. Let's wet it. I'm just gonna put a drop on it. Of course, I'm so glad you could join. Yeah, please, just as a reminder, if you want to send it to my Instagram, Lacey Walker Art or Rebel Unicorn Crafts, I would love to see what you did. All right, so I've wet it. Let's see what's going to happen if I try to grab it here. Let's just grab a tester strip. It's working. Ooh, that is pink. That is pink. Let's grab some more of that. And let's put it in here. I'm going to do a mixture of grabbing straight from here to get the real pigmented stuff, as well as let's see how pigmented I can get that. This is only the second time I've made paint, so I'm not so sure that it's the best it can be yet. I don't think you want to see what you did. Well, I do want to see, but you know, obviously if you're not comfortable sharing, you don't have to. But I can almost guarantee it's better than you think it is. Everybody is their own worst critic. And when you're learning, sometimes there are parts that don't turn out great, but maybe your sky was just phenomenal, or, you know. All right, let's actually put this down. All right, so we're going to start with just some of that vibrant color here. Woo! It's pretty bright. It's definitely a neon. Now I'm going to just take some of the straight pigment. Let's see how it's going to work. Works pretty good. Does it play nicely with maybe this orange? Can I use a different color with it? Gosh, that orange is really bright, but it looks super dull in comparison to how pink this is. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. All right, let's add some of that yellow, see what that's like with it. And let's compare it with my pink that I usually really like, which is this Quinacridone Magenta. Oh, that looks almost purple in comparison. Let me see. Oh, you guys are too nice. There's also a question about how I make paint. So I mold these. I got a glass molar for Christmas, and I had pigment, and then I made a watercolor binder based on somebody's recipe I found online. And I just mold them together and then until they really emulsify together. All right, that's kind of cool. I can't believe how much brighter this pink is. That's funny. I don't know what I'm doing. I am just playing with it now because I'm having fun. Watercolor and gouache. Ooh, I have not painted with gouache in a while. Okay, so this is really funny, but I legitimately remember finishing this one thinking, wow, look at how vibrant that pink is, and now I feel like I've ruined it because this is so much brighter. Wow, okay. All right, let's actually take some of these off. If you are done with yours and they are dry, you can take the tape off, but I recommend using a hairdryer because you can, what it does is the heat releases the adhesive so you can take it off and you won't rip your paper. I'm going to risk it for you guys because, again, I don't want to subject you to the hairdryer. But I want to take some of these off so you can see even how much they improve just once you take the tape off. And then I can add some trees so that you guys can see how to either if maybe you're thinking like it's just too boring for you, or if you need to hide some sort of a mistake, a tree can be a perfect way to do that. A galaxy seam. So we actually did night sky type galaxies. Was it last week? No, it was 2 weeks ago. So I do think there is a live replay on my YouTube if you can't wait. But yeah, I think I'm going to kind of, I'll take recommendations for classes and requests, and depending on if I have time to develop something new, I will take new ideas. But sometimes we'll rotate through a few different things. We've got some flowers, we've got these, we've got galaxies. The abstract one, if anybody came last time, that one's really fun to try a few different techniques and just play. So yeah, yes. So the answer is yes. We can do galaxies again, as well as I already have a couple of videos up about that on my YouTube, and TikTok notified me today, or was it yesterday, that I can do 3-minute videos now, and I don't really want to do them all the time because, see, that's why we don't do this here. That's too bad. This was my favorite one I did too. But that's why you want to use the hairdryer. Anyways, I don't really want to have to do the 3-minute long ones all the time because people come to TikTok because we have short attention spans. But there are some little things like a little tutorial on maybe a galaxy where we might not need the entire 3 minutes, but having a little extra time more than the minute, I can actually do a shortened version. Okay, so I've ripped this. Let's see if we can actually salvage this in case you're running into a similar problem here, because it happens. So I've got a ripped piece here. Now, I wouldn't sell this like this because, well, obviously. Let me go grab something. We can either take glue. I might include something like this as a freebie in an order, or sometimes if I just really like them to have as samples. We can either take some like Elmer's type glue, or you can either even take sometimes white gouache, or this is acrylic paint. And there are binding capabilities in this. So let's take a little bit of this paint. Ooh. Sometimes this really sprays out, so I'm trying to make sure I don't accidentally spray this white paint all over me. Please come out. There we go. We can take some of this white paint. Don't put it on your watercolor brush because it'll ruin it. But we can put it on a different brush, or we can even just, I'm just going to put a little on my finger here. And I'm just going to dab this on just a little bit and smooth it down. And it's not going to be perfect. It would probably be better with some glue, but that's far away and in a tub. But we can kind of fix it a little bit. It's not, I'm sad I ripped that one. I really like that one, but you know, it happens. So that's why we painted a bunch. It's 80 degrees in your house and you're running a hair dryer. If you have anybody in your house, are they looking at you like you've lost it? Okay, I'm going to be a little more careful with these. Maybe. I was going to add another layer of mountains to this one. I'm not going to take that one off yet. You've been using acrylic brushes and they didn't work too well. Do I have any recommendations? So I've started recently using this one. This one is not a super high priced one. I think this one was like $7. But I bought this from Blick and it's a Dynasty size 10 round brush and I really like this one. I think it's a Taklon. Your sister is less than thrilled with you. I like Taklon brushes and just round ones that have a really nice point on them. I also have been using this one for more kind of expressive pieces. This is the Black Velvet Silver one, but it moves a lot more. If you're a beginner, I recommend getting one of these Taklon ones. I think that these are really easy to learn on with how the bendability. This one you've got a little less control over, so you have to kind of like already have, well, you don't have to. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but if I had started by using this one, I think I would have been really discouraged by watercolor because I needed to know a little bit more about it in order to take advantage of this one. Okay, let's take off a few more of these. There we go. And I'm getting a little more ripping on the sides, but you know, it's all right. Okay, I think those are the ones I'm going to take off for now. I am going to add a layer of mountains onto this just because I want to know what it would look like. Okay, taking some lighter colored one here. Ooh, it even kind of makes that blue kind of glow a little bit. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, the acrylic ones, sometimes like with the flat washes, the acrylic ones are just fine, or some of the detailed type things, they're fine. But in general, my recommendation is to find one round brush that's a watercolor brush that you really like that has a good tip. There's a ton of different brands of these. I really only have like the Master's Touch one and which I think you can get from Hobby Lobby. I've had those for a while. And I've got a Winsor & Newton one. I'm probably not going to show you that one because it's really beat up. But this is my new recommendation, I suppose. I have never tried bee watercolor paper. Well, hello. All right, let's add some trees because I only have a few more minutes, so I am kind of rambling here. You can add these either before or after. I usually add them while they're still with tape on them because I like the nice crisp lines, although sometimes, every once in a while, I will add them when I've removed the tape because it kind of breaks up the barrier and it can look nice. But let's add some trees. Also, if anybody has asked a question, the chat has started moving a lot faster than I'm used to. So if you've asked a question and I have not answered it, just, I guess, keep putting it in so hopefully I see. Oh, well, I'm glad that I could help. Let's add some trees. So if you had a spot on here you wanted to hide, like this is actually a little rough over here, so I want to make sure there's a tree there. First thing I do is, well, one, I'm going to use this Papermate felt tip pen. This is my favorite pen to use. It is not waterproof, so you want to make sure your pieces are dry before you do this, but you can add it as a final step. You just won't be able to add any pen on, or any color on top of this because it will bleed. But as a final step, I really like this pen. So I take this pen, and the first thing I'm going to do is just figure out where I want my trees to be and how high. So I'm just going to draw their trunks, just with a nice line. Just like that. And then, I don't know, there's a little weird spot here, so let's make a slightly shorter one here. And then I like to work with the rule of threes. That's always been ingrained in me. You don't have to. Art, you can break as many rules as you want. But sometimes it's nice when you're not sure what you're going to do to just work with kind of the rule of threes or odd numbers. All right, so I've got my trunks. And now all I'm going to do to make my trees, yeah, it is kind of a bravery test. You just got to commit and go for it. Is I'm just at the top, I'm just going to tap a few times to make some of those little pieces. These are going to be evergreen trees. I'm just going to define the tops by kind of just tapping. And then, kind of like the mountains, I want to take some of this control away. You know, most of us have drawn trees kind of like this most of our life. And those are cool trees. But, I don't know, I like them to be a little more natural. So feel free to make whatever trees you want. But the way I do mine is I basically scribble. So I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger as I go down, and it's okay if there are some bare spots. Maybe there's a little nest. Maybe a tree or a squirrel lives there. We're just going to squiggle up, down, around, side to side. We're going to make some areas that are sharper, some areas that are a little looser. And we just make it bigger and bigger until we get to the base. I think I saw a question about washi tape. I do sometimes use washi tape. It's not as sticky, which is good in that you won't rip you're less likely to rip your paper when you take it off. But I do find it seeps more for me. So you can use it for sure, but it's not my preferred tape. So yeah, I'm just squiggling. I know that is that's not a great explanation of that, but the less I think about the way, like this is, if I were to take like a microscope and zoom in, this is kind of what my scribbles are looking like. So I'm not like specifically doing this or anything. They're going in every direction. Let loose on this. Just, yeah, painter's tape or masking tape. Everybody finds a little bit something different that works for them. Got some friends who like the blue, masking tape. Some people like that frog tape. That's a little bit too much for me. Okay, so I've added my 3 trees. I'm feeling like they're a little bit bare, so I think I'm actually going to add in a couple more. Maybe there's another little one that's smushed in here. There. maybe there's another one here. You can add as many or as few trees as you want. There we go. It's a little better. Tips for keeping the corners from bleeding in the tape. So one is just to make sure that things are really pushed down. You can use the back end of like a brush to push these down here. You can also get like a toothpick and really push down there, and that will help. I don't really have a problem with that except for when I'm being super haphazard about it. Again, I am in Colorado, and I have started to notice that maybe I have less problems with some of the bleeding and some of that type of stuff because we are so dry here. I don't have to deal with some of that humidity that causes some extra seepage. So maybe I will, maybe I can request my one friend, Andrea, who lives in, got another rip there, who lives in Georgia, to make a video. And you guys can follow her and see what she has to say about preventing some of that, because she has problems with humidity that I just don't have to deal with that, so I can't give great advice. There we go. Careful, careful, careful. And there's one with the little trees. Humidity gives you trouble with alcohol inks. Here are the trees. My Instagram is Lacey Walker Art or Rebel Unicorn Crafts. I've got two. Don't expect any great content from me there because TikTok has kind of taken over my life. And I have started to ignore Instagram. But yeah, here are the trees. Some happy little trees, little Bob Ross vibes. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining me today. I really appreciate your time. And yeah, it's fun. So every Saturday, 11 a.m., and I usually try to post a video a couple days beforehand telling what we're going to do, or also to set a little live reminder, because I know sometimes it's hard to remember to get on the live. And if you're ever confused about my class times, I always have, if I've got a scheduled one, it's right in my bio, and that'll be the time that I do it for that week. So thank you so much for coming, and I hope everybody has a really good day. I will post this probably tomorrow, maybe later today, to YouTube if you missed parts and you want to go back in and try different parts. Oh, thank you guys so much. Everybody is so nice, and thank you. And yeah, please send me pictures. I know not everybody likes to share the pictures. If you're brave enough, please let me see. I do usually keep the pictures, just so you know, so I might screenshot them. If you specifically tell me, I don't want you to ever show this to anybody, you can go ahead and do that. You can tell me that, it's fine. But I still like to see them. So thank you so much. YouTube is also Rebel Unicorn Crafts. Have a great day. How to send a pic? Just on Instagram, you usually have to request to be friends or send a message, but just right through Instagram. Lacey Walker Art or Rebel Unicorn Crafts, and there are links in my bio. See you later.